Tell us how you got into the Army in the first place. How old were you?
I was about 18.
18.
I tried to go in when uh, I tried to enlist with my friends right after I got out of school,
Mm-hmm.
and they wouldn't take me. They said I was too little, too light,
Yeah.
and
Well, we saw that photo. You're a pretty skinny guy.
didn't weigh enough.
Yeah.
But in November of 1968, they decided they wanted me and they drafted me.
Drafted. Did you think that you weren't going to be drafted
It
because
was,
earlier you hadn't gotten in?
yeah, I thought, I just kind of knew in the back of my head that I'd probably be drafted because of what was going
Yeah.
on. I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to it
Yeah.
because, back then that wasn't on your mind.
Yeah.
Uh,
You knew there was a war going on, but you're not really paying
but I
attention.
did know there was something going on, and
Yeah.
I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it.
Sure.
In the mail, I received a letter saying that my friends and neighbors had chosen me
You,
to
you
go defend them.
you've been selected.
So,
Do you have any recollection of? I mean, I imagine when you saw the envelope, you knew what it was.
pretty much.
Um, any
Well,
recollection of what went through your mind, or?
I think Mom opened my mail and she knew. She told me. So
Do you remember what her reaction was?
it wasn't good.
No.
No.
Was she quiet, or do you remember that
She was
said
quiet and cried and
Mm.
because I think down deep she knew once I got my training and stuff that I would be going to Vietnam.
something? Go
And
ahead.
there's my dad was a minister, and there's one person in his congregation that his dad wanted my dad to see if he couldn't help get his son out of Vietnam, from going to Vietnam.
Oh,
And
like
so
like getting some kind of deferment or something like that?
something, I don't know what he was thinking, but
Or, mm,
you know, that didn't, I mean, it didn't happen. They couldn't get him out.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what my dad done, and I'm sure he tried to help all he could because he was
Mm.
just that type of person.
Mm.
But you can't, there's some things you can't get out of, and I guess
Mhm.
that's one of them.
Yeah.
First memory was we was flying over, and the pilot came over the intercom and said, "We are now entering in the Republic of Vietnam." And about that time, we hit a cloud, and the plane rocked,
Oh,
shook
turbulence.
a little bit, turbulence,
Oh boy.
and I knew they were shooting at us, and our plane was going down.
Really? Yeah. Oh boy. Turned out just to be
That's-
turbulence.
Yeah, just the turbulence. That kind of scared me.
Did you? I mean, that indicates that you were kind of scared already.
Hmm.
Were you really aware that you were a little anxious, or is that what made you realize?
Well, I thought I was ready to go
Mm,
over there,
yeah.
and because when you're 18, 19, you're tough. You can whip the world, and
Mm,
you just go over there with that in your mind. I did in my mind, and
mm.
you learn different.
How long did it take in Vietnam, or what was it in Vietnam that made you realize that maybe, as tough, you were a tough guy, but maybe you weren't as tough as you thought?
The first night that we was in country, we landed at an airstrip, and we was getting ready to be sent out probably the next morning.
Yeah.
And we hadn't been on the strip maybe 20 minutes, and we got into the barracks.
Mm.
They were signing us in and all this, and there was some mortars started dropping.
The Viet Cong were
The
sending
Viet
in
Cong
mortars.
was sending in mortars,
Oh boy.
and that wasn't too friendly,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
I didn't know what to do. I was scared.
yeah.
I really was.
And this is your first
This is the
half
first
hour in
night.
country?
Yeah, at least
Wow.
half hour. And a guy that me and there was just two of us at the time that went together, and I didn't know him that well. And he was probably 6, 8 inches taller than I was. And we had our steel pots on and all
Yeah,
this and our,
yeah.
so, we was all headed back to the back to get into some bunkers,
Mm-hmm.
and he seen some wall lockers. He got in a wall locker, and I don't know how he made it,
You don't know if
but
fit in there.
you know they say when you're scared you can do anything,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm
Wow.
living proof of that because I seen him getting that little bitty tiny skinny wall locker, and
So welcome to Vietnam.
welcome to Vietnam. That's
Boy, wow. And so, I mean, you know, veterans say, you know, they realize, you know, this thing is for real at some point. It sounds like you realized that immediately.
I did,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Wow.
I wanted Mama to come and get me real quick. I was in the ammo. I humped ammo.
So you carried ammo.
I'd carried ammo when we have a fire mission. They would call down what we was going to use, the round, and if it had a on the end of the cannon, on the end of the bullet, you might call it.
Yeah.
It
Or the
had a-
missile or whatever it's called.
Yeah. It had a where you screw in the cone,
Mm-hmm.
and it had different times you could set on it, and they had the time, and if they didn't have the time, then it just you wouldn't mess with that, but you
Okay.
just screw it in, or it was
Yeah.
already screwed in,
Yeah.
and then you just take the powder increments out of the canister,
Mm.
and if it was they had 7 increments of powder, and if it was they'd say 6 shot or something like that, you'd pull out 7, and then that would be 6.
Oh, okay. And so this was part of your job too,
Yes.
to prepare the, I guess I'm trying to think of what the right word is, because we're
Me
speaking
too.
of artillery, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's not the shell, but I mean, to basically prepare
All we
the
ever called
artillery
them was
ammunition.
artillery round.
yeah, the artillery round, to
Yeah,
prepare the
around.
artillery round to go. So, so you're carrying the rounds to the artillery or preparing it beforehand and then bringing it over?
Yes.
And, but why not just have a pile of the rounds right by the artillery piece? Why do they need somebody to, you know, to carry it over?
Well, I'm assuming for safety because weather, and we didn't want to get anything. I don't know, maybe a misfire if it got wet.
Oh, okay.
So we kept it in an ammo bunker. It
Oh,
was
okay.
built out of sandbags, maybe about 4 foot high
Okay.
and 15, 20 foot long. Had different things in it, you know. But that's where our ammunition was kept.
And did you bring the rounds over one at a time?
Yes, sir.
So is it possible we don't want to have the rounds close to the artillery because the concussion could possibly set
That's
them off,
possible.
or- Okay.
But
something
but
like
to
that.
like I say, I think it was, and if we got hit, they wouldn't have any protection. If
Oh,
if
right.
a mortar came in directly and hit it,
Right.
even with them sandbags, that's not nothing, but it's better than having them just sitting out in the open.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. Did you ever have the VC or the NVA shoot back at you guys? Did you ever take incoming mortars or rounds from them?
Not as much. If we did, it wasn't. Well, we never had. Let me retract that. We never had anybody to shoot back into our camp.
Okay.
Never did.
Yeah. Now I know that. I mean, there are firefights going on around your fire bases.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, I know that.
Now there was one. We'll probably talk about it later, but they infiltrated close down below us, maybe 2 or 3 blocks away, and
Mm-hmm.
of course then they started coming up after us, and it's kind of hard to shoot going downhill because you got
Right.
the friendlies are over here, and then
Sure.
the VC's coming up. So
This
you
was
know.
a case you're at your fire base, but is the Viet Cong had overrun some forces,
Yes.
and so they were getting closer to you guys, and but at this point you weren't able to use your artillery anymore because they were
I
just
don't-
because of the angle.
Well, yeah, we
Where they were.
used it as much as we could,
Yeah,
because we tried to keep it away from the area where the
where your
South
families were.
Vietnamese were.
Oh, okay, the South Vietnamese. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's who the VC were overrunning, the South Vietnamese, or?
Mhm.
Oh,
But
I
we
see.
also had some guys down there that were one person in particular. I remember him talking to us about. He had 3 days left in country,
Wow.
and they was sending him back to the rear area. That's what we call it,
Mhm.
where you go back to get out
Right.
and you start your paperwork to all this stuff,
Yeah.
and he didn't make it
He was
Uh,
killed that
that
night.
night.
Oh boy, only 3 days to go.
So yeah.
When the VC were, how close would you say they got to your fire base as they're taking on
Mm.
these South Vietnamese forces?
Well, the ones that were firing, they left.
The South Vietnamese forces.
Yeah,
They took off
they took off, went home or somewhere. I don't know.
during the fight.
Yeah, the next
took
morning
off.
they came back and started shooting again.
So who they took off? So who held off the VC that night?
We did.
Yeah, you and the U.S. forces remaining down
Yeah.
there. Wow. Okay. And so, in that instance, did the VC get within 100 yards of you guys?
I
would
don't
you
think
say?
so.
Something like that. Okay.
I don't think so.
Mm. But were you guys preparing to, engage in a firefight if they got much
Well,
closer to where you were? or
we was in the firefight. I mean, we was
You were in it.
yeah. We were firing. I mean,
Yeah.
we were doing all we could do.
With M16s or
We
artillery?
didn't grab our M16 yet, but they were close.
Yeah.
Now we did have some that were firing their M16s, but
Yeah.
you gotta remember, this is artillery, and we just had our M16s in case something else happened.
Yeah.
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 So, but we was mainly a battery, or our mission was to fire support.
Right. So guys out in the field, they're in a firefight or they've identified enemy forces. They'll call in for you
Airstrikes
guys, airstrikes,
Mhm.
or they'll call in for you guys to send out artillery.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you and I were talking before, I think you mentioned that there was one instance where you could hear on the radio
Yes.
what was going on, and do you mind sharing that?
That
memory?
was, that's not, it's really sad because people like glory and want to be recognized,
Mm,
I don't mind giving a person what they deserve,
right.
but we was, like I said, we was just kind of sitting around. We was supposed to clean our howitzer once a day, every day. So we was out there cleaning it and swabbing the barrel and all this, that, and the other. And the guy sitting by the radio, he said, "Hey, come here." So we kind of congregated around the radio, and they started talking about incoming. So we sat there and listened, and we broke in and said, "This is artillery, 5th 27th Artillery, and we'll fire for you if you need us." And the major, I think, broke in. He said, "No, we're fine. We got it under control."
Mm,
But from the sound of things on that radio, they didn't.
mm,
And you could hear guys screaming and hollering, and we need some support. We need some other firepower and all of this. And
you can hear the battle raging on the radio.
you can hear it. You
Wow.
can hear the M16s going off and mortars
Wow.
dropping,
Yeah.
and you see that on TV, but we didn't see it, but we heard it,
You can hear it.
and it's not the best to hear. And when you know there's somebody out there that needs help and you can't, you could help them, but the higher powers don't want you
The
to.
officer in charge is saying no.
So anyway, later,
Yeah.
a little bit later, they did, after it was almost too late, they did call in, we did fire a couple of rounds for them. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the Stars and Stripes
Mm-hmm.
newsletter that we get over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
The major that was over that, he won that battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there was an article about his
About his-
heroism or
yeah.
something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so your interpretation is that he was eager to make lieutenant colonel, and this is one of the ways to do it.
He
Maybe?
he did go up in rank little while after that.
Oh, is
yes.
that right?
And it's not worth it. It
No,
wasn't right.
I mean so far as you know, who knows, the whole story, but so far as you know, it looks like this major was jeopardizing the lives of his guys and
Mhm.
maybe lost some guys because, we win this battle, the glory, comes to me, not to the artillery guys who bailed us out, and that helps him get up in rank. Was that how long after the battle, or how long after this incident did you see that article in Stars and Stripes?
I don't recall.
I mean, within a week, something
no,
like that?
it was
or
maybe a month or
maybe
so.
a month. And
Yeah.
do you remember in a vague way your response? Your reaction in your own mind?
I don't think I'm allowed to say.
Okay, yeah, well, we get the idea. Yeah, we get the idea.
And that just wasn't mine. It was a whole
Everybody felt
battery.
the same way.
Our whole section was felt that way.
Yeah.
If I sit and dwell on it long enough, I can visualize
Mm.
us listening
Yeah.
to the radio, and
Mm.
we put our flight jackets on and our steel pot every time we fire, and we had all that on, and we was ready.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
for them to call it down, we was ready.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
it didn't happen right then. It happened a little bit later, but like I say, it was just about over with then. Well, we had just landed on top of another mountain, another hill, and we just decided we'd just walk off a little ways and snap a shot, because that's a pretty background.
Yeah.
And that is some beautiful. That's a pretty country over there.
Yeah. That's right.
It's just what's going on that we didn't care about.
Yeah.
So
But you did have time to notice it's a beautiful country.
sometimes, yeah.
You're able to notice
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Now I notice you've got your shirt open here, and then in a number of your other photos, you don't have a shirt on at all. So
Yeah.
what's the explanation for that?
It's hot.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
hot. We had a thermometer we got from mechanics or somebody. We stuck it in the sand, and I think it was 150 degrees
Good grief.
in the sand.
In the sand.
I don't know
Wow.
how hot it was,
Yeah.
but it was hot.
So when you think of the environment of Vietnam, I mean, mostly what you hear vets refer to is the heat, the humidity, and the rain. Is that the same for you? Just the
Yep.
yeah,
Monsoon season,
yeah,
you couldn't get out of it.
yeah,
Just like the heat,
yeah, yeah,
you don't get out of it. You just make the best of it.
yeah. So you're wet all the time, right? Is that you're either sweating or you're getting rained on,
One of the two.
or you're getting rained on, but you still feel like you're
Yeah.
sweating because it's
Yeah.
still
And-
so hot.
And
Yeah.
that's why, you wear a flight jacket, which is probably close to 2 inches thick,
Mm,
and it's kind of heavy for protection,
yeah,
and a steel pot, and we have on our summer fatigues.
Yeah.
And so at night, we got to where if we had a fire mission, we wouldn't put our fatigues on. We'd just go out in our underwear.
Oh, wow.
They didn't like that.
Yeah. Wow. You had your flak jacket on still?
We had our flight jacket on.
So your
we had our
flak
steel
jacket,
pot.
your helmet, and your underwear.
Yeah,
And boots?
yeah.
Okay.
They didn't like that.
Unfortunately, I didn't see that photo in your collection. So.
I don't think we took that. Well, if we did, they didn't develop it.
Okay.
I don't. But
Yeah.
and you know, I
Yeah.
mean, that was boxer. It wasn't. So I just said like a pair of shorts, but
Yeah. Okay.
we didn't see a problem with it, but the higher ups did.
I guess it doesn't seem very military. Yeah.
Who's gonna see us?
Yeah. Exactly.
That
right.
was our question, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And even if they say nobody could see you,
Mm.
it didn't matter. That
Right.
wasn't the way the military dressed.
Yeah. That's
And I
right.
said, well, no, we said,
Yeah.
but we're in Vietnam.
Mm.
We're fighting. There's a lot of stuff that happened that, like I say, who would have known? Who would have thought that we'd been out there shooting in our underwear?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
cares?
Yeah.
I mean, they're not
Right.
going to show that on TV.
Mhm.
And even if they do, it looks like we're in a pair of shorts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh,
So was this an issue? Like, some officer said something about you guys you can't be shooting the artillery in your boxers, and
I
this
think-
is the conversation
I
that
think-
follows. Like,
I
so
think
what's the point?
I think the captain
Yeah.
come down on us.
In the context of things, it seems like a stupid thing to focus on, right?
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
was doing our job. We
Yeah.
did exactly what they asked or told us to
Yeah.
do, and that's what we were. Now in the daytime, we didn't dress like that.
Sure.
I mean, in the middle of the night, you get woke up.
Yeah.
I mean, we just,
Yeah.
even though we were saving them time, they didn't care. You take time to put your britches on.
Yeah. Yeah. What comes to mind when you look at this photo of yours from the war?
Well, we give these guys a name.
Uh-huh.
See no evil, speak no evil, and hear no evil. That's what comes to my mind.
Yeah.
Now, if you'll notice them little kind of tubes back
Yeah.
over to the
Uh-huh.
left in that picture,
Yeah.
that's what the ammunition was in.
Oh, okay.
It came in them in black tubes, and you had to take all of it. They were inside of the ammo bunker, and you would, best of my memory, you take one out, and then you'd take it out of that black tube, and you just toss that tube aside, and then later you'd pick it all up.
Oh, I see.
But then you'd set your round
Yeah.
to whatever you needed to set it at, and
Oh, okay.
get the powder and everything all ready.
Now, do you have any idea, what are these guys doing on the base? Any idea, or just what sort of things would local Vietnamese do on or around the bases where you
I
were?
have nowhere to go. They didn't do too much for us. If we was going out on Helleborn, they would drop us off, and this one in particularly that I'm thinking about, they was only supposed to be there for a week. We ended up staying there a month,
Wow.
and I think that's the place that everything got burned up. Because when you want the chopper to land at a certain area with our gun,
Yeah.
the Chinook, you throw smoke around, and that's where they land. But all of the wind from the blades, that Chinook, it started to fire
Oh,
up
boy.
on top of this one hill,
Wow.
and they had to pick up our gun while we was beating out the fire and set it over in another place while we got the fire beat out to keep from, but it burned up, some M16s, it burned up some
Wow.
clothes, it burned up
Wow.
some,
So one of your fire bases
Stuff.
went up in flames.
it did.
Gee whiz. But in a typical, a typical stay on a fire base would be a week or two, something like that?
Yeah,
And that's no showers for that time?
that's right.
Or you maybe take a shower in the rain if the rain came through, something like
Yes, on this one place, this one hill we did, we was up on top of this hill, this mountain hill, and it started raining. And we'd been there for 2 or 3 weeks already,
that?
and it's getting ripe. So
Yeah.
it started raining, and we just got our soap and got out there, and you strip off because there ain't nobody there but you and the other guys, you know.
Yeah.
And so we just started washing soap, using our hands and washing soap. And a few seconds later, it quit raining.
Oh no.
Just kind of like turned the water off.
Mm-hmm.
Waited a few more seconds and it started again.
Started
So we
raining
rinsed
again.
off. So it was in good shape.
Boy.
Then a few days after that, or before that,
Mm-hmm.
there was some Vietnamese soldiers, the South or the Mountain Yard people, or they had, I think it was, I don't know if it was Vietnamese, but they come walking at the edge of our camp with a boa constrictor over their shoulders. There's about 3 or 4 of them,
Yeah.
and they had that dead snake over their shoulders just walking. Just gonna cut that sucker up, I guess, and eat it.
Oh boy. And did they cook it in at your fire base, or
No.
what did they do?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But I was glad to see it get out of there.
So you just mentioned that you had these South Vietnamese soldiers come by, or maybe they were the Montagnards. But on the fire base itself, did you have South Vietnamese, or was that only Americans there?
We had some
Okay.
South Vietnamese.
Yeah.
Now the Mountain Yard people, that was a different bunch, a different group. Them were fighting suckers.
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
They,
I've heard they
you
were
don't
tough.
mess with them. They
Yeah.
don't take no slack off nobody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. So did you do some operations with them, or?
one time I think we was set up, and we had them as our perimeter.
Oh,
They
okay.
they did watch our perimeter.
Yeah. These are the Montagnards, right? They're an ethnic minority, right? And they
Right.
were, I don't know if allied is the right word, but they helped the U.S., right?
Yes,
too?
they did.
Yeah.
They were good. They were good soldiers.
They were
you know.
tough fighters,
They
huh?
were tough.
I've heard that. I've heard that, very tough, and I've heard that maybe they weren't so interested in the rules of war and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty tough. How about the South Vietnamese soldiers? How generally would you characterize them?
I didn't trust them. We couldn't trust
Yeah.
them really. I mean, I hate to say that about other people that was supposed to
Mhm.
be in there with us, you know.
Yeah,
But you couldn't trust them.
yeah. Well, you mentioned during a firefight, some of them took off, huh?
Well, that's yeah. And
Yeah.
then and they had one 155 howitzer, which was a lot bigger than ours.
Yeah.
And I guess they was from the village, or they went somewhere,
Yeah.
you know. And then the next morning when they come back, it was daylight, they started firing again. At what? I don't know.
Because the
But
fight had actually ended
It
by
had,
that point?
oh yeah.
So it's almost like let's pretend we're in the war. When there's an actual fight going on, we're going to take off. When we know that the fight's actually over, we'll fire our artillery to make it look like we're in the war, something like
Mhm.
that.
So I can't trust nobody like
Mm.
that.
No,
We couldn't.
and you know, you hear this a lot, and you know, you hear this. I mean, what you hear is the VC and the NVA were incredibly motivated,
Hmm.
and the ARVN forces not so much. That
Yeah.
maybe there were elements of the ARVN forces, but overall,
Well, some
the ARVN
like I say,
forces not so much.
some were, but you know,
Yeah.
when you got guys that are from a different country
Yeah.
over there fighting for you or with you,
Yeah.
you know, you need to hang around and kind of help if you're supposed to.
Especially if it's your country.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah.
we could not fire upon the Vietnamese unless we were fired upon.
Mm.
And I think that's about true in every war that we've had. I think. I
The
don't.
rules of engagement. Yeah.
So, you know, and then here these guys could probably fire any time. I don't know that, but they probably could.
Yeah.
And well, I know they could because they come back the next morning and started
Just started
firing.
firing. Yeah. Did it at the time? You know, did it seem like? Did it seem strange to you that I'm several thousand miles from home over here, fighting for these folks' country, but the guys who actually live here don't seem to be very interested in the fight.
I think we had that discussion. me and the rest of the guys that was in our squad.
Yeah.
I think we did.
And that must have sapped your motivation a little bit. So, I mean,
Well-
kind of the inevitable follow-up is, so what are we doing here if they don't seem to care about the fight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It did, but we knew that we had to do what we had to do so we could get back.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if they dropped a mortar in on us unexpectedly, why, there's nothing we can do about that.
Sure.
But we tried our best to keep alive.
Yeah.
And you know, like I was telling you before, we didn't see a whole lot of action like the infantry and everybody like that did.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
we did what we could do, because some of them people that was in that picture, speak no evil, hear no evil, and all them,
Yeah.
they might have been North Vietnamese at night, you know.
Yeah.
You know, they might be fighting against us. You don't know.
Did you have, when you were at the fire bases, did you have local Vietnamese who would come out and want to sell you stuff? And was it possible for locals to come out and try to sell you stuff? Or did you interact much with the sort of the non-combatant
Not-
Vietnamese? Or
Not really.
Yeah.
Now, I think sometimes we had Mama San do our laundry
Oh, okay. Yeah.
at different places. And when we were up on top of the hills,
Yeah.
the mountain, we didn't. I mean, I don't know. We probably just wore what we had for a while and then maybe
Okay.
changed, because there ain't no sense in changing into something clean when your body's dirty.
Right. Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
still gonna stink.
When you're out there in the dirt. Yeah.
So-
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So when you're on the fire base, you don't have much. You
Not
don't
much.
don't have a whole lot of interaction
No.
with the locals.
Now, I drove the Deuce and a Half
Mhm.
with a big rubber bladder on the back of it.
Mhm.
And I think I told you this before. I'd go down to the river,
Yeah.
and then I'd pump water out of the river, and then I'd come back. And I'd dump some, which I didn't know what it was, but it was probably chlorine at the time. I'd dump it in that bladder,
Yeah.
and then it would give it time to mix up. That's what we showered in at night.
Yeah.
And we pumped it up to the big tower in this one place. A lot of places wasn't like this, but they had a tower that held water, and then that did all the showers at night.
Oh, okay.
And I'd do this every day. And I had more, at the time, more chances to intermix with the people, but I didn't,
Okay.
because I had a schedule to meet.
Yeah. 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 You've got these locals on the bases, but a lot of times you can't really be sure that you can trust them either, right?
Mhm.
So you may have a fellow on the base who, is the barber by day, and Viet Cong sapper by night, and you hear these sorts of things, or maybe maybe there's a local woman who does the laundry, but she's also picking up intelligence and passing that on to the VC by night. And it may be because, they're kind of stuck in the middle, right? They've got the VC putting pressure on them for information or for other things. But is this something that you guys were aware of at the time, that you know, even if the local Vietnamese on the base, if they seem friendly, if they seem nice, but still we can't ever really be sure that we can trust them because of the situation.
It takes a while,
Yeah.
maybe, to get some kind of a trust. I know it did for a lot of us,
Yeah.
but you don't know. It's hard to it's really hard because from one minute to the next, you'll be talking to somebody, you'll be friends with them, and then the next few minutes or that next night or that whatever, you might be fighting against them, you know.
Yeah.
You don't know. I mean, it's really hard to of course we didn't mingle with a lot of them.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't maybe, like I say, maybe the cooks did, maybe the people that worked on the vehicles, maybe they did, but I don't think there was too many of them around us.
Right. Yeah.
Because we were more like we'll be here for a little bit and then we'll be there for a little bit, and then there was one truck driver that was leaving country, and he had a little boy he hauled around with him, and he left him with us, and we was pretty sure that we could trust him.
So this was how old was this boy?
He was probably somewhere between 8 and 12.
Wow.
He was young.
And he's just hanging out with you guys on the fire base. Really? Did he sleep there too?
I don't remember when or he slept.
Okay.
He might have slept in a different with a different company, because
Mm.
we had at the when we could, and we was back in the back. If they would, why they did this, I don't know. They would pick our gun all the time, and we was the one that would go hellborn,
Okay.
and then the other guys would stay back, and he probably stayed back with
Stayed
them.
with them. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember.
But so it sounds like in your case, I mean, you would have brief interactions with Vietnamese, but not much.
Yeah,
But your
no.
general perception of the army of South Vietnam and some of the locals is that just given the situation, it's just hard to trust folks.
Well,
And,
you
know,
you're over there to fight somebody.
yeah,
They're Vietnamese, and there's South Vietnamese, there's North Vietnamese,
yeah,
and you don't know where that point is. I mean, who's who?
yeah.
You know.
Especially because the VC don't wear uniforms, right?
That's right.
You just don't know.
And
Yeah,
it's hard to realize, or hard to pick them out. So it's
Yeah.
hard.
yeah.
And you think he's your friend, and next thing you know,
Mm.
he'll slit your throat. He can.
It's just one of the many things that makes this such a tough situation, huh?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.